June 22nd, 1941, 3:15 in the morning Berlin time. The twilight of the summer solstice hangs over the Bug River. On the western bank, the German Wehrmacht waits in concealed assembly areas, engines cold, the scent of pine and damp earth masking the smell of oil and cordite. Across the river, Soviet border guards patrol the demarcation line established by the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, largely unaware that the peace is about to shatter. The silence is not empty. It is the held breath of over 3 million men, 3,000 tanks, and 2,000 aircraft. At the signal Dortmund, the stillness breaks. Artillery fire erupts along an 1,800-mile front, stretching from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Carpathian Mountains in the south. The barrage is selective, targeting communication lines, ammo dumps, and known command posts to sever the nervous system of the Red Army before it can twitch. In the darkness, special operations units from the Brandenburg Regiment have already infiltrated Soviet territory. Dressed in captured uniforms or civilian clothes, they seize key bridges across the Bug and Sand rivers, cutting wires and securing the arteries for the armored thrust to come. Bundesarchiv Militararchiv. For the soldiers of the Soviet Fourth Army near Brest-Litovsk, the war begins not with a declaration, but with the collapse of their barracks walls under heavy mortar fire. Panic is immediate and absolute. Telephone lines go dead. Flares hiss into the sky, illuminating a chaotic scramble for weapons and boots. The verifiable records from the NKVD border troops indicate that many units are overrun before they can issue a single coordinate to their superiors. Simultaneously, the Luftwaffe initiates one of the most devastating airstrikes in history. Hundreds of German bombers cross the frontier at high altitude, aiming for 66 forward Soviet airfields. The objective is air superiority within the first hour. Soviet pilots, alerted by the roar of engines, rushed to their aircraft. Contrary to the myth that the entire Soviet Air Force was destroyed while sleeping, German combat reports confirm that many Soviet fighters were taxiing or taking off when the bombs fell. They are caught in the vulnerable transition between ground and sky. By noon, the Soviet Air Force loses approximately 1,200 aircraft, the majority destroyed on the ground. Bergstrom 2007. On the ground, the invasion force moves in 3 colossal prongs. In the north, Army Group North, under Field Marshal von Lieb, surges toward Leningrad, their panzers tearing through the Baltic states. In the south, Army Group South, under von Rundstedt, faces stiffer resistance and difficult terrain, struggling to pierce the localized defenses of the Kiev military district. But the decisive blow falls in the center. Army Group Center, commanded by von Bock, wields 2 massive panzer groups led by Guderian and Hoth. Their mission is a double envelopment, a pincer movement designed to trap Soviet armies west of Minsk. At the tactical level, the Wehrmacht operates with clockwork ruthlessness. Infantry divisions march 20 to 30 miles a day, dust coating their faces, while forward panzer units bypass strongpoints to disrupt the Soviet rear. The German logistical tail, relying heavily on horse-drawn transport, strains to keep pace with the mechanized spearheads. Inside the Kremlin, the atmosphere is one of paralyzed confusion. At 0400 hours, Foreign Minister Molotov receives the formal declaration of war from the German ambassador, Count von der Schulenburg, who delivers the message with visible agitation. Yet orders from Moscow to the front line remain contradictory. Joseph Stalin, wary of being provoked into a war he believes is premature, initially hesitates to authorize full-scale retaliation. The first directive issued by the Soviet High Command, Directive No. 1, orders troops to be at full combat readiness, but strictly forbids them from crossing the border or firing on German aircraft unless attacked. An order that arrives hours after the Luftwaffe has already turned airfields into burning scrapyards. It is not until 0715 hours that Directive No. 2 orders the destruction of invading enemy forces. By then, the Wehrmacht has penetrated 10 to 30 miles deep in several sectors. Glance 2010. The human cost escalates rapidly. At the Brest Fortress, a 19th-century citadel at the confluence of the Bug and Mukovets rivers, a mixed garrison of NKVD troops and Red Army regulars holds out against the Austrian 45th Infantry Division. The fighting here is ferocious and intimate, room to room, cellar to cellar. German war diaries express shock at the tenacity of the defenders, who fight without water or hope of relief. While the main German columns bypass the fortress, the siege ties up infantry reserves and costs the Wehrmacht heavily in officers and material. As the sun climbs, the magnitude of the catastrophe becomes clear to Soviet field commanders. General Dmitry Pavlov, commanding the Western Front, loses contact with his forward armies. He moves his headquarters into a bunker, lacking situational awareness. His mechanized corps, theoretically powerful on paper, run out of fuel and ammunition in uncoordinated counterattacks. Without air cover, Soviet tank columns become easy prey for Juncker's UD-87 Stukas, which dive-bomb the snarled traffic on the few improved roads. By the evening of June 22nd, the German advance has exceeded the most objective timetables of the OKH, German High Command. General Franz Halder, chief of the Army General Staff, notes the strategic surprise was complete. The Soviet border defenses are pierced, their command structure decapitated. In the chaos, Soviet civilians flee eastward, mixing with retreating columns, clogging the very roads needed for reinforcements. The timeline of the next 48 hours sees the situation deteriorate from a border skirmish to an operational collapse. On June 23rd, the German pincers of Army Group Center begin to close around Bialystok and Minsk. Guderian's Panzer Group 2 races ahead, ignoring exposed flanks, driven by the doctrine of Bewegungskrieg, war of movement. Soviet attempts to form a coherent defense line at the Berezina River fail as German engineers bridge the waters under the cover of overwhelming artillery superiority. In Moscow, the reality of the invasion finally pierces the denial. Stalin creates the Stavka, General Headquarters, on June 23rd, attempting to centralize command. However, the flow of information remains broken. Field reports are often hours or days old, leading Moscow to issue orders for counterattacks by units that no longer exist. A verified account from the diary of a German anti-tank gunner in Army Group South describes the scene on June 24th. The heat is suffocating. We pass burning trucks and abandoned heavy tanks, the T-34s and KV-1s. They are monsters, impervious to our 37mm guns, but they sit silent, abandoned for lack of fuel. We press on. The dust never settles. NARA T-314. By June 25th, the scale of the encirclement becomes visible on the maps in Wolfschanz and the Kremlin. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers are being corralled into pockets. The pre-war Soviet doctrine of offensive defense, fighting the war on enemy territory, has proven fatal against a mobilized, experienced aggressor. Yet amidst the collapse, the seeds of German failure are sown. The distances are vaster than the planners in Berlin accounted for. The road network is primitive, turning to mud after summer storms. And yet, despite the encirclement, pockets of Red Army soldiers continue to fight behind the lines, disrupting supply convoys, a foreshadowing of the partisan war to come. As the initial 72-hour window closes, the map of Europe is irrevocably altered. The verified casualty reports from this opening phase are staggering. The Red Army suffers tens of thousands of casualties per day. The Wehrmacht, while victorious, suffers losses in men and equipment that it cannot easily replace, losing more aircraft in the first month than the German industry can produce. The invasion, planned as a rapid 4-month campaign, has begun with a tactical masterstroke and a strategic gamble. The doors to the Soviet Union have been kicked in, but the structure has not collapsed. Instead, the conflict transforms into a war of annihilation, where the objective is not merely territory, but the existence of the opposing state.